My name is Nick Drapeau, and I am the director of Next Level English in Almaty, Kazakhstan. And I want to talk to you today about critical reading for the IELTS exam. So welcome to our course, and I'm really happy that you decided to join us, and we really hope that you'll take everything from this course and be able to apply it to your specific exam strategies and be able to get a really high score on the IELTS exam. I've prepared hundreds, maybe even thousands of students over the years. I've been teaching IELTS for 10 years, and I've learned a lot of these strategies, but really only in the last 2 years have I understood something new, that actually students with really good critical thinking skills do the best on the IELTS exam. And critical thinking is not necessarily your analytical skills, and it's not your creative skills. Critical thinking is actually something, it's a skill that you can learn. Anyone can learn it, and that's what I want to teach you today. So let's get started. So first of all, you have to understand what the IELTS exam actually tests. Yeah, because a lot of students don't really even know what they want from you. So there's a couple of points. So the first point is that IELTS is a standardized test. Standardized test means that there's always only one right answer. Even if it's confusing for you, even if you don't really know exactly, could it be A, could it be B or C or D or whatever, there is exactly one right answer. And there's exactly a reason why that's right. And there's a reason why the others are wrong. Sometimes even more importantly, why the others are wrong. Because the right answer could be a little bit confusing, and you might not think about it as the right answer when you first read it. But if you just eliminate the other options and then you look back at that answer, you'll understand, oh, yeah, I just didn't quite understand what they were saying here with this particular word. But upon closer inspection, you'll find that exactly that answer has to be right. There's always only one right answer. There's nothing subjective about, especially about the IELTS reading test. You could say that the speaking and the writing have some subjective elements. I mean, they try to reduce the amount of subjectivity by using rubrics, but we'll talk about that in our other courses about writing and about speaking, how to improve your scores in those sections. But in the IELTS Academic Reading test, you have to understand only one right answer, okay? Another important thing to understand is that IELTS is actually a placement test. And what that means is that it's designed to check your English level. Nothing more, nothing less. When students come to my English school and they want to join a course, we always test them first. A good teacher should always have some pre-assessment, it's called, where I just check to see what their level is before I assign them into a group. It's very important on the IELTS exam because you need to have a higher level, maybe upper intermediate or advanced, to even think about this exam. But placement tests are essential if I want to make sure that the student will actually be able to do the work. And that's what universities are checking. So universities want to see your English level. They want to make sure that when you join this English-speaking university, that you're going to be able to swim and not sink, you know, that you're going to be able to be like a fish in water, if we continue that metaphor of just being able to handle everything that they throw at you. You know, they can give you 100-page text and you'll be able to understand the main arguments in a day or two and be able to speak about the main arguments in class. And so it's really important that you actually have a good English level. So the next thing is that the IELTS Academic Reading is a scientific reading test. And some students, they don't really understand what scientific reading actually is because maybe you've never even read a text like this before. It's actually, I mean, there are some tricks to it, but it's adult level reading. Yeah, it's reading that is designed for educated people. And you don't have to be like an expert in the field, but you have to be able to understand the arguments and the ideas. The ideas themselves are not like incredibly complex for the IELTS exam. The ideas are pretty simple, but they're written with an academic language. And we'll go over that in our future courses when we talk about attitude and tone. We're going to be talking about like the scientific tone and the attitude of the writer. So, but that comes a little bit later. But for now, I want you to understand that these are not like the texts you read in school. Yeah, these are not like the texts you would read in a magazine on the airplane or something like that. Yeah, these are scientific texts that are written for people who are educated and usually adult level. So let's talk a little bit more about exactly like the IELTS academic reading test, what is included there. So there are three scientific texts, three texts, and each text has about 900 words, give or take. They say between 600 to 900, but I've noticed that texts usually are a little bit longer. I don't see a lot of like 600 word texts. Most of the texts that I see on the IELTS exams are about 900 words. Also, there's roughly 12 to 15 questions per text with a total of 40 questions. Yeah. So if there's only 10 questions on one exam, you're going to see more on the others, like maybe 15 on the other texts. Yeah. So, but 40 questions total. And so if you do the math and you count it up, you say, okay, about 900 words, about what, 2,700 words total, 40 questions. If I spend 1 minute per question, that means I have 20 minutes to read 2,700 words. How can I do that? It's totally possible. The 60-minute time limit, actually, you should be able to read these texts in, I would say about 3 minutes or 4 minutes. Yeah. And you might be thinking that's impossible, but it's not impossible. It's just you need to have the right kind of strategies. And that's what we're going to be talking about, is like the strategies for reading. And I want you to understand that like the IELTS exam is a little bit different from like TOEFL or some other tests like SAT. SAT is very different, but the TOEFL exam is also like a placement test similar to IELTS. But TOEFL exam has a lot more multiple choice questions, whereas the IELTS exam has a lot of different question types. They have true, false, not given, yes, no, not given. They have headings. They have sentence completion, note completion, and many, many different question types. And a lot of students, they like to study these different question types and try to learn different strategies for each question, but actually like they're missing the point. By studying the different question types so carefully and trying to learn the tips and the tricks and the strategies for each question type. Yeah, there are some, like for example, for multiple choice that I can tell you, and there are some that are really good for true, false, not given that I can tell you in general. But actually, what you should understand is that all of the question types are checking the same basic thing. And that one basic thing I'm going to talk about later when we go into like talking about big picture. The same basic thing that all of the questions are checking is your comprehension skills. And comprehension skills are, it's not analysis, it's not synthesis, it's not like personal application or something like that. They're not asking you to like debate and give your opinion about these texts. They're checking your comprehension. And so comprehension is actually not a very complex thought to have. Yeah, when you just, to show that you comprehend something basically means that you can recognize it in different forms. Yeah, with synonyms, for example, that you can recognize the same basic idea, but in a more abstract or in a more general wording. So that's what they like to do. They like to have a text that's very specific and very detailed, and then the questions will be a little bit more general and abstract. And by seeing the way that you move from these concrete or specific things in the text to a more abstract or general concept, that's how they check your comprehension skills. It's how they check your comprehension skills in lots of exams. The TOEFL is the same. The SAT is the same in that regard. They're checking your comprehension skills that way. And yeah, that's something that you really need to understand. So to just continue on, I want you to understand that we need to answer the easy questions first. I know it's hard to just ignore a question that you want to really, really understand it, but one thing I notice with like really intelligent students is that they will focus on the details and read and reread and read and reread and reread the harder questions over and over and over again. And they might spend 10 minutes on one question. They might even spend more if I didn't stop them. They lose track of time, and by the time they actually maybe think they found the answer but are not sure, already half of their time is finished. So to make sure that you answer all the questions that you would certainly get right, make sure that you answer the easy questions first. And then when you have that extra time at the end, go back to the harder questions. Yeah. And as I mentioned before, there is always only one right answer. which means that there is always other wrong answers, and that they are wrong for a reason. It's not just because wrong is wrong. Yeah. Um, Actually, the IELTS is checking something called logical fallacies, and fallacies basically just mean like a flawed logic. There's flawed logic in them somewhere. So when you check comprehension skills, yeah, like as a teacher, when I check students' comprehension, I ask them to paraphrase or to summarize something. I'll give them a text and I'll say, okay, tell it back to me in your own words. Yeah, give me a summary of that. Can you paraphrase that? Can you say it in another way? Basically, what that does is it forces the students to maybe think more generally, think abstractly. It's part of the comprehension skills. But there's some flaws. Yeah, if I tell a student to read a text about how the city of Shanghai is overbuilding and these large super mega skyscrapers are too heavy and they're sinking into the ground. If I ask them to summarize that content and they say, well, it's about Shanghai, it's about like, the city, it's about how the city has some problems, it's about all of the difficulties of having these huge buildings. Okay, like you're kind of summarizing it, but you're also missing some important details. They're maybe overgeneralizing. Yeah, it's about some buildings, it's about some problems in the city. Yeah, so that's too general. So that's an example of like a flawed answer. So if I ask you to summarize something, and I tell you to talk about maybe your favorite kitchen equipment, yeah, maybe it could be a blender or it could be a grill or something like that. But if you talk to me about what your favorite breakfast food is, and it's off topic, right? And so being able to understand that some answer options will be just off topic. Yep. You read them and yeah, maybe it talks about kitchen equipment, but it talks about something else. It maybe we'll talk about how, the history of ancient kitchen equipment or something like that. And it's like, well, no, the text is about modern kitchen equipment or even kitchen equipment of the future. But the answer will be talking about like past kitchen equipment, for example. Another fallacy that we find is that questions could be too broad. Yep, they could just be, like I said already about this example of Shanghai, like it's about some city and some buildings. Yeah, it's too broad, right? Another type of a wrong answer is that it's too extreme. And this actually we'll go into this in more detail when we talk about attitude and tone later. Academic tone is usually very polite, and when scientists write, they don't like to say something too directly. They don't like to say this is wrong, this is bad, this is terrible. They like to maybe be a little bit more polite in the way they disagree. So if they give a point or they tell their opinion, they're not going to use extreme language. They're not even going to say like the first, the only, the best, the worst. Usually they'll say like one of the best. A possible explanation for this is, yeah, they use more kind of guarded language. Another fallacy is that they just maybe we don't have enough information to answer. So if we're reading about maybe some marketing and branding throughout history, and maybe the author might be pretty negative about branding. Maybe he doesn't like that we're turning people into brands, for example. But you might be reading the first paragraph saying that like branding was introduced in the 19th century, and then he continues on. The question might be saying that the introduction of branding was an undesirable development. And you understand undesirable is negative, and you say introduction of branding, well, maybe, yeah. One problem that students make in IELTS a lot is that they say, well, maybe. It sounds like that. I think probably. But we don't have enough information to say, because in the introduction, he just said that branding was introduced in the 19th century. He doesn't say that it was undesirable in the beginning. I mean, yeah, he goes into talking about the negativity of branding later and the negative aspects of it. But just the introduction of it, we don't necessarily know. So it would be like, we would have to say not enough information. Like this is usually checked in a yes, no, not given, or true, false, not given context. And this would be like a not given kind of answer, where you're just like, no, I don't have enough information to say. You don't project your own thoughts onto the text. You have to stick with what the writer says. Another type of fallacy that we can see very often is a half right, half wrong answer, or maybe not even half and half. It could be like 99% right, 1% wrong. And my students are always really shocked when I tell them this, but a 99% right answer is wrong. One word can make it wrong. So I was just reading recently with one of my students about submarines, and the text was basically talking about the history of submarines, yeah, different versions of submarines throughout history. And there was one version of a submarine that actually was connected to a ship by a cable, and what the text said was that power was transmitted to the ship through a surface vessel. So like a vessel on the surface transmitted power to the ship, and that's all we know. That's all we know. Of course, you could think that, well, power is for this, power is for that, but that's your own thoughts. That's not what it says in the text. The question was actually checking this fallacy, and the question was saying that it said, true or false, or not given. Power for moving it was transmitted from a surface vessel. Yeah, and power for moving it. They said yes. And the thing is that we don't know, was it for moving or that it was just power, because the power could also be for instruments. The power could also be for lights. The power could be for their life support systems, for example. We don't know that the power was actually for moving it. And just that one word, moving it, made it totally wrong. So the correct answer would be not given, because we just don't know. Yeah, maybe, but we just don't know. So again, not enough information, half right, half wrong. These are fallacies that we very often see. And just to finish our first lecture here, I want you to just keep this in your mind, that wrong answers always contain a logical fallacy. It's not always about mastering true false or mastering headings. It's about recognizing logical fallacies in all of these different question types. Yeah, because the IELTS is checking your comprehension skills, and the way they check comprehension is by checking the accuracy of your summaries. And each type of question is checking your summarizing skills. And good summaries are accurate, are correct, are not too general, not too extreme. They basically restate exactly what's in the text in other words. A logical fallacy, on the other hand, would be too broad, too extreme, would maybe project some of your own thoughts onto the text. And that is what we need to really focus on in the beginning here. So this is just our first lecture of general testing strategies. Next time, we're going to be looking at some more specific examples, and we're going to be looking at some different ways to recognize these fallacies in texts. So thanks a lot, and look forward to hearing from you. And make sure that you connect with us through the board here, and you can send us just your comments as well on these different lectures, and we'll do our best to answer all of your questions. So thanks a lot. Bye-bye.